Hi there, welcome to the video and hello again to return viewers. You find me here on the Tuesday the 30th December 2025 and I'm starting to record the December 2025 book haul video. It's going to be a long one this time. I'm filming it in small chunks to make it a little more manageable. So if you see things slightly change in the background or with me, that's because I'm recording this over a couple of days, and then hopefully around the 31st or the 1st of January I'm going to be stitching it all together into one hopefully coherent whole. Okay, so December. So a few days before the beginning of December my mother passed away, as you may have seen in a previous video. So I suddenly found myself on bereavement leave from work. Lots of 4 days of thinking, and so distractions were welcome, and so my sister decided to take me out to see the Chertsey Book Barn. This is a legendary bookstore in the local area. I've heard about it for years, but I've never actually been there because it is quite a distance away and I don't have my own transport. So I'll put a map up here. So the red arrow, it shows you Chertsey. It's roughly 1 hour's drive out of Christchurch, so maybe 100 kilometres or a little less. So it's on the way southwest or south towards the town of Ashburton. It's between Rakaia and Ashburton, Chertsey. So what's there is not much. It's a very small town, but what you immediately see is a large building, industrial building. It's called the Book Barn, but I think it originally was some type of workshop for the railways when the railways were expanding through that part of the country. It's a legend now because it is probably the largest or second largest book shop in the country, and like I said, I'd always wanted to go there, but transport was an issue. So things combined to make it a reality for me. So we went into the Book Barn in the early days of December, and it was quite amazing. Like you might suspect, it's a large building stuffed with used books, second-hand books as we may call them here. So like a kid in a candy store, I went around and having a look, and as always I usually check out the science fiction section, so usually a good marker of the quality of the books on offer. Science fiction section was a little lacking. A lot of the books had been sitting there for ages, looked like they'd all faded in the sun on one side of the bookshelves because of the window being there. Selection wasn't huge in the science fiction section, but elsewhere the general books, fiction, everything was catered for. There was specialist sections on all sorts of things: music, TV, romance, all sorts of things like that. And there was a section of DVDs and even VHS tapes for those who still hang on to that old technology. Prices not as cheap as you might hope, but that seems to be a familiar thing in all the used bookstores now. Everyone's cost of living has risen, and they've repriced all their books to match this. So what did I find there? First of all, Making Comics by Scott McCloud. Now this is one of 3 books comic artist and writer Scott McCloud put out in the early 2000s. First one was Understanding Comics, where he goes through the history of the graphic comic form, then discusses the ways it works and is read and all that type of thing. And then he put out a second book, Reinventing Comics, which was basically a screed on how comics could survive in the 21st century in the age of the internet. And he kind of settled on pushing the idea of microtransactions, that you'd find a comic online and you'd pay a few cents to read a page and all that type of thing. A lot of that never came about because this was in the dot-com boom, really, and so a lot of those dreams crashed to the ground. And then he put out Making Comics, which is kind of like a guide to the creation and design and physical work of working on comics. And I didn't think I had this book already, so I picked, my sister, who was with me at the Book Barn, decided that some books that I picked out would be held back as Christmas presents, and this was one of them. I didn't think I already had this, but looking in recent days, I discovered I actually already have a copy of this in storage somewhere along with the other 2 volumes. So, oh well, it's another copy. I can look at it here without having to go to a storage unit. So that is Making Comics by Scott McCloud. Next up was this chunky old hardback, Marooned by Martin Caidin. Now, Martin Caidin was a hot writer of what you might call these days airport novels or techno thrillers back in the 50s and 60s. Now, this is a UK publication of one of his most famous books, which is Marooned. I'm just trying to find the date in it without success. Here we go. Okay, this is 1964, so it's the original book was written in 1964. Well, this version of it. Now, Marooned tells the story of an American space mission, which, as the title suggests, gets marooned in orbit in the early 60s, and all the efforts to rescue the crew from both east and west, the USSR gets involved, and so on. And it's a nail-biting thriller ride, which was made into a movie, which I remember seeing on late night television when I was growing up several times. The thing about Marooned is, as technology and the space race was changing in the 1960s and early 70s, Martin Caidin, the author, basically rewrote sections of the book on the go and continuously republished it to keep it up to date with what was going on and what was known. So I think this is the original version. Certainly the dates match with the original publishing of the book. So that is Marooned by Martin Caidin. Also by Martin Caidin is a book in a series which became possibly even more famous than Marooned for a while in the 1970s, and that was the Cyborg series, which became the basis for the television program The $6 Million Man. You know, we can rebuild them, we have the technology. Now, the first book in that series is simply called Cyborg, which tells about Steve Austin's terrible aviation accident and his rebuilding with 70s advanced technology as the Bionic Man, and diverges a bit from the TV series. And anyway, Caidin went on and wrote 2 or 3 more books in the series following the adventures of Steve Austin, now with his super advanced $6 million man body. And the second one in that series was this, Operation Nuke. Now, this is a mid-70s UK edition. UK editions have these wonderful painted covers. I have the equivalent copy of Cyborg. I'll try and find a picture and put it on the screen now. So this is Steve Austin against nuclear blackmailers in the 70s. It looks very 70s. He's holding an Uzi. There's a mushroom cloud, and there's a couple of SR-71 blackbirds in the sky behind him. So this is the second Cyborg adventure by Martin Caidin, Operation Nuke. Next up, just to prove me wrong, I found a copy of Jack L. Chalker's The Return of Nathan Brazil in the cover that I actually said in another video was very hard to find. And I had bought another copy in a different livery. So now then at the book barn I find the one that was missing from my matching set. It's from the later books in the Well World saga, or the second Well World saga, I forget. I think there's 2 distinct series. These books were fun when I was younger, but you know, looking back, there's a lot of really dodgy misogyny and sexual weirdness in these books, which seem to be Jack L. Chalker's thing in his other books as well. So that is The Return of Nathan Brazil. Now I have a matching set. Okay, another book which was held over as a Christmas present was this one, The Best of Saki. This is a 75-year-old paperback, which feels a little fragile. Some type of mass market paperback published by Guild Books. Says on the front, 1 shilling and 6 pence. Now Saki is one of those authors you've heard referred to and referenced and recommended all my adult life, and I'd never actually read anything by. He was a fairly open gay man in the Edwardian era. And he wrote short stories basically lampooning or taking the piss, as we might say here, of the upper classes, the establishment, and basically dropping them into situations where they do fight or flight from bad situations, and much fun was had at their expense. Saki, the other notable thing about him is when World War I came along, he was in his 40s and didn't have to basically enlist, but he decided he wanted to do his part, and that led to him going into the front lines. And in 1916 he was killed there by a German sniper. So that is the best of Saki. It's a collection of short stories by him, obviously the best ones that they thought at the time, and it is selected and introduced by Graham Greene, who was one of the big name authors when this book was published in the 50s. Interesting to see when I was trying to look up details on this book that the same selection with the Graham Greene introduction has been republished, reproduced many times in different covers by different publishers, so it's obviously a popular form of Saki's stories. I think even Picador got on the act and republished this one later on. So that is the best of Saki. Next up, another book which I have a more recent copy of, but I couldn't resist this. This is an original 50s, I think, or early 60s. Let me just check. Man looks at book on camera. Yep, this is a 1963 edition of Wasp, or The Wasp as it's sometimes called, a book about subversion and terrorism against a stronger enemy. I have the science fiction masterworks edition, which came out fairly recently, maybe in the last 10 years. I have not read it yet, but I saw this one in the book barn and I couldn't resist it. It's very 60s. So anyway, it's basically about how much one man can do a difference against a technological opponent or oppressor, basically guerrilla warfare, terrorism, disruption, that type of thing. So that is Wasp. Last of all, another book which I already have a copy of. It's becoming a theme there. Couldn't resist leaving this one behind. This is Alistair Reynolds' House of Suns. I actually have a copy of this in storage somewhere, which I never got a chance to read before it all got packed away. So I will possibly actually read this one soon. Now, Alistair Reynolds is one of the kings of latter-day hard sci-fi. He draws on his background as a space scientist, or for the European Space Agency, I believe, and writes these hard-edged science fiction novels, and he has a couple of series ongoing, short stories, and a lot of standalones, and this is one of his most popular standalones, House of Suns. It's very well recommended. Obviously I haven't read it yet, as much of these books, but yeah, so House of Suns. There's a massive blurb, I won't bore you with it. So it's a science fiction epic, but not a series, self-contained, and it may be a good thing. Okay, so after coming back from the Chertsey Book Barn, I received a package from Amazon in the mail, and that came... Ooh, not the tripod then, sorry. So there was two books which I had ordered in the recent weeks before then, and the first one there is Claire North's Slow Gods. Now, Claire North is an author which a lot of people rave about. Her most famous book is probably the 15 Lives of Harry August, a kind of time loop type story. I somehow have come across two copies of it and own two copies of that book, which I've always been meaning to read. This is becoming a very familiar story. I also have another book of hers, IK84, I think it is, but I've never actually read something by her, so this is my first Claire North, and it's a departure from her. It's a all-out space opera story, basically. It's the first time she's done something like that, and this is the book I am currently reading, and I'm about 100 pages into it, and really enjoying it, really enjoying her imagination, her language, and basically her view on society and the differences between different types of societies that are found in this book. Yeah, it's basically probably carbon copy space opera as in some of the things in it, but it is it's entertaining. It's keeping me entertained. Okay, and as my nose starts running, the other book that I got from Amazon at the same time was this book, The Martians by David Barron, and I recently finished reading this one, and it is a very interesting, very illuminating book about a period between 1890s and the First World War, where Mars was a media sensation, the planet Mars I mean. Largely the story of Percival Lowell from the US and his beliefs, claims, monomania perhaps of there being life on Mars as being evidenced by canals being on Mars. And of course it's a complicated story. Lowell himself dives in and back and out of the story, but the most interesting thing is it's a peek into the beliefs and media and public feeling of that period, what they call the Findicicle world, or at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. People were looking for hope, looking for saviours from beyond. I guess it's a familiar story in our days as well. So Mars was seen as like if the Martians had created these great canals to irrigate their dying world, they were obviously great people, great utopian society, and we really had to get in touch with them and learn from them, and so there was mass delusions that Martians existed and they were better than us, and the media, initially the cheesy tabloids, pumped the stuff into the public, and then the mainstream media got in on it, and various scientists who pontificated on all of it, and everyone went along for the ride until it all fell apart. And like I said, it's largely the story of Percival Lowell and some other famous figures from that era, like Nikola Tesla and Alexander Graham Bell, and the various politicians and scientists and engineers. They all had part in this story. So that's The Martians by David Barron. Okay, so I'll be back soon with even more books. Cheers. Right, on with the show, and I am back again with the second lot of books for the December book haul. Without further ado, let's get on with it. Okay, so on the 6th of December, it was a Saturday. It was the day following my mother's funeral. I decided to go on a second-hand bookshop expedition early in the Saturday morning, and I first headed out to Steadfast Books over in Addington, Wise Street, I believe, Addington. As usual, they had a lot of choice examples of books to choose from, but my funds were a little limited, so I had to kind of put back a couple of books just to keep things manageable. And the two I got from there, this one, Going South by Colin Hogg. Now, I've already done a review video of this on the channel if you want to know more. Basically, it's a travelogue, road trip, autobiography kind of combination. Colin Hogg and his longtime best friend go on a road trip around the southern parts of New Zealand's South Island. Along the way, we learn more about their history as friends, Hogg's life, his ancestors' lives, and we learn about the history of the little towns and locations they visit and all the quirky characters within. So that is Going South by Colin Hogg. Also there, I did almost bought Peter F. Hamilton's last book, the Exodus one, but put that one down when I found a book by Michael Swanwick, Stations of the Tide. He's an author that always seems to click with me whatever I've read. The most memorable ones are The Vacuum Flowers and The Iron Dragon's Daughter. There's a kind of a science fiction kind of edge, almost cyberpunk type thing, but he kind of drifts into magic and fantasy as well. He's kind of drifts in between, back and forth between them. And this one I don't know a huge amount about, but I've had it on wish list for ages. It's basically a kind of, like I said, a mix between science fiction and fantasy type thing about a planet where some type of greedy dictator has kept all the technology to himself and presents it to the public as magic, and some disaster happens and they have to track down this guy who has hoarded all the technology. So that is Stations of the Tide by Michael Swanwick. Okay, so after being in Addington and Steadfast Books, I headed back into the central city and then headed back out to Dove Books in Beckenham. So Beckenham? No, that's not right. Bishopdale, sorry, Bishopdale Mall. So I headed up to Bishopdale Mall, and of course on the way to Dove Books you can't help but go past Books Plus, which is like their overflow store with a lot of very cheap books, like $2, $3, $4 per book. Not a huge amount there that I wanted at this time, but I did find a copy of this. This is Mission of Gravity by Hal Clement. This is an old 70s, I think, NEL copy. So Mission of Gravity is a very well recommended, well reviewed, well renowned science fiction book from the 1950s, which is kind of like a thinking aloud type thing. What would life be like on a planet with massive gravitational pull? How could life evolve and sentient life develop? And it takes the form of a human who goes to this planet and has to interact with the locals. Now, like I said, it's 1950s, so all the usual concerns about stereotypes and what have you from that era remain. But this is like one of those seminal books in science fiction, and I'd never actually come across a copy of it before, so that'd be interesting to read. So it is Mission of Gravity by Hal Clement. Also there, a little off the wall perhaps, is this one, What's Your Type? It is a full book-length study of the Myers-Briggs test, or Myers-Briggs personality test, how it was developed, how it is misapplied, misused in the modern world and misunderstood. All sorts of weird and wacky historical events involving personality tests, basically. So it's a full-length non-fiction account of that. Looks like the previous owner never even cracked the cover of this one. I don't know if that is a bad sign or what. Maybe just some people aren't interested in personality tests. I guess it intersects with my life because I've frequently been diagnosed, if that's the right term, as a introvert, or INFJ, I think is my personality type. So you can take from that what you like. So that is basically about how this type of personality type thing was developed. So that is What's Your Type by Merv Imrie. Okay, so I finally got to Dove Books itself, and as usual there were many books more there than I could afford, so I had to kind of triage what I could take, and I came across this gem, a UK Picador, see white spine Picador, copy of Exhalation by Ted Chiang. Ted Chiang's short stories are fantastic. He's a fantastic science fiction writer. I keep waiting for him to write a full-length novel or maybe another selection of short stories. This was his second collection of short stories, the more recent one. Just about every story in here is a gem. I read it out originally in an ebook form. The standout story for me in this one is the title story, Exhalation, which is a really fantastic book, story, about a pneumatic-powered, artificially intelligent robot discovering the mechanism within its own mind, or whatever, how it works and how he thinks. And it was inspired by a Philip K. Dick story, The Electric Ant, which is one of the best Philip K. Dick short stories. There are several stories in here also, range from pseudo-historical stuff to even looking at religion and all that type of thing. So Ted Chiang is a fantastic short story writer if you haven't got into this stuff. His other collection is The Story of Your Life and Others, the title story of which was adapted into a movie, Arrival, a few years back, about the aliens and their non-linear lifestyle, basically. And yeah, so if you ever come across Ted Chiang short story collections, grab them, they're very good. Okay, and the last one from Dove Books is this very recently published book by Ben McIntyre. Now, Ben McIntyre is a famous, I guess you'd call him military historian, puts out a lot of books along the same lines about various military units, special operations forces, that type of thing. It's most popular probably SAS Rogue Heroes, which was the inspiration of the Rogue Heroes TV series, which have been 2 season series so far. So he's probably riding on the popularity of that, putting out more books along those lines. And this one looks at the SAS again, but it focuses on the 1980 Iranian embassy situation in London, where a bunch of Iranian dissidents who thought the newly installed Khomeini regime wasn't Islamic enough, basically took over the Iranian embassy and held, I think, 90 people hostage in there. And basically the SAS formulated a mission to retake the embassy by force and carried it out. And it was very celebrated in the UK media, and at the time, that UK media, we get a lot of their, well, I did at the time get a lot of their printed and written and televisual material. And I remember it was kind of, I don't know, jingoistic type of stuff at the time, and for years afterwards, magazines and books and comics would kind of riff on the Iranian embassy siege as some type of great triumph, or showed the masterful nature of the SAS in the modern day, and would have characters and even Action Man dolls dressed in the same type of outfit that the SAS used to force their way into the embassy, basically all in black with a grey hood with a gas mask and clutching a submachine gun. That became a certain look in the 80s, and there were movies, Who Dares Wins, I believe, was one, which basically kind of copied this look, and you know, the SAS were the hard man of the decade, something to celebrate by the heroic British, apparently. Anyway, this is apparently the definitive look at that operation. There's a lot of photographs and stuff in here, which I certainly hadn't seen before. There's one about the aftermath of the mission. Yeah, so that is The Siege by Ben McIntyre. Okay, so I'm having a little break now, and we'll be back in just a moment for you with the rest of the books for December. Hi, welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed the time warp there. For me, it was an entire day. For you, it was a few seconds. It is now the 31st of December 2025, very last day of the year. So I'm hoping to get this book haul video all wrapped up and uploaded, and you may see it on the 31st or the 1st, depending on your time zone. Anyway, on with the show again. Okay, so between like the 9th and 14th of December, 3 books which I had ordered online arrived. First up was Junji Ito's Cat Diary, Yon and Mew. Now, I've done a full sort of review of this on the channel already. I can say it's a manga comic by a master of manga horror, but he writes a comedic tale about his exploits, adventures, misadventures when he lets 2 cats into his life. It's fun, but the tone is weird. I'm not sure it's survived the translation successfully, well, just for me, and yeah, so that is Junji Ito's Cat Diary, Yon and Mew. Next to arrive in mid-December was this book, Warlock by Oakley Hall. Now, I ordered this one via Blackwell, so they're the only people that seem to have it in stock. Blackwell's a UK online bookshop. So this is Warlock, like I said, by Oakley Hall. Now, Warlock I've had on a wish list for a year or two, mainly because I've read a lot of interesting things about it. It was a Western, written in the 1950s, but it was kind of a transgressive, subversive, postmodern Western, which kind of changed the way those type of stories were told. And it was kind of, in its wake, Westerns looked at things which were not just surface level. It was like, you know, the meaning of things and what have you. So I've always wanted to have a look at this book, so now I have it in hand. So that's Warlock by Oakley Hall. And few days later in December from Amazon arrived Angel Down by Daniel Kraus. Now this book made a lot of end of year best of lists, so that intrigued me. And it is apparently a gritty World War I drama, a kind of Saving Private Ryan type thing, where the object of the rescue turns out to be a literal angel, fallen angel from heaven, who is on the battlefields of World War I, and may hold the key of ending that conflict. Sounds intriguing. I hope it's not too hokey or sentimental, as these books have a tendency to go once a religious aspect is added to them. But so that is Angel Down by Daniel Kraus. Okay, so a few days later after that, and the following weekend, I decided to go have a look at King's Books and Stamps in their new location over in Stanmore Road. They've been there about a couple of months now. They're still sorting out their stock and they're arranging things there. And I had a quick look online and found that they were running a 20% off all books on the lead up to Christmas. So I thought I'd have a look, see if there's any particular gems hidden there. A few days before that, the news came through that the science fiction author John Varley had passed away, and this book attracted me in the shop. I don't know if it was the name or the rather shiny cover, but this is Millennium by John Varley. I believe it is an extension of a short story that he wrote earlier, but in the late 80s Hollywood came calling and wanted to adapt it into a movie, so he did that, and this is his extended version of the story which became the movie. And I understand the movie wasn't so great and it was a bit of a flop, but we have the book as a result. So what Millennium is about is a air crash investigator who discovers some irregularities about a certain air crash. It turns out there's a science fiction aspect that people from the future were leaping through time and grabbing the passengers off the airliners which they knew had crashed and taking them into the future for some nefarious reason. I don't know a whole lot more about this. I can't even remember seeing the movie, but I believe it was on TV a few times. So that is Millennium by the late John Varley. Also there, I was intrigued to find a copy of The High Frontier by Gerard K. O'Neill. I know I mentioned this back in the review of Hammerjane Luck when I went on a tangent about 70s space colony ideas. This is the book O'Neill put out with his ideas about the O'Neill cylinders and space colonization in general. So it all seemed part of the great future for those writers back in the 1970s. They had all the sums and the equations worked out how we were going to live in space in mass numbers by the 80s apparently, and just all we had to do is invent with all the technology needed. And Gerard K. O'Neill put out this book about his ideas, like I said, and this is a 1978 version of a 1977 revision of the text. This one was published by Corgi in the UK. I do believe I have an ebook of the original version of this book by O'Neill, but this one has a lot of neat, I'll try to find examples, line art type illustrations in it which I hadn't seen before, so that's why I grabbed it mainly. I'm a sucker for good illustrations, so some interesting stuff in here. So it's maybe a good look at the dreams of the past. So that is The High Frontier by Gerard K. O'Neill. Okay, so the last weekend before Christmas, not this past weekend, the one before, sorry, I went to Reverie Books over in Edgware. Now, Reverie Books is a fun little place to find gems, as usual, like most second-hand bookshops, perhaps. I've had a large wish list of books on their website accumulating, so I took a list of some of the ones off my wish list along there to have a look and see if I could actually finally find these actual books. I was only partially successful. A number of books which are on their site don't seem to actually exist in the store anymore, or if they do, they're misshelved. I did find a few, so let's get on with that. So First one is Franz Kafka Metamorphosis. This is a collection of Franz Kafka's short stories, including the titular Metamorphosis. I've only ever read one or two short stories by this author before. He's very famous, from a voice from the past, and I've seen reviews of this particular edition produced by, let me see, Alma Books. They seem to be a publisher that produces new editions of a lot of classic books, probably cheap ones that are out of copyright. And this one has a different translation that than is usually used for Kafka. And I've seen some reviews saying that it's very poor and awkward. So anyway, so that is Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Okay, another book which I'd had on wish lists for a while. This one, This Idea Must Die, and this is a non-fiction science technology angle type book about ideas in those areas which we have to get over to progress as a species, or just for science to progress. It was a question put out in about 10 years ago by a magazine or a journal of some type, and they had various famous and semi-famous and erudite and well-respected figures in each field to kind of reply to their question, what ideas do we have to get rid of or get over to progress. So that'll be an interesting one to read. So that is This Idea Must Die, edited by John Brockman. Okay, on a lighter note, also in Reverie I found this book, which has been on my wish list for a while. Maria Bamford's Sure I'll Join Your Cult. Now, this is a memoir about her life and upbringing. Maria Bamford being a comedian, whatever you like to call it, an American comedian. She's well loved and enjoyed online and around the world, and so this is basically her story about her life. Basically, that's pretty much it. So that is Sure I'll Join Your Cult by Maria Bamford. Finally, this book, Polkinghorne, by Steve Bronius. Now, Polkinghorne is a name which will trigger a lot of things in New Zealanders in the past year. It was Philip Polkinghorne was the accused in a murder case in New Zealand over the last 12-18 months. One of those cases of the century which seem to turn up on a regular basis about every 3 months these days. And usually means that there's enough salacious details for the media to dine out on it for months, if not years. And that was the case with this one. He was Philip Polkinghorne was a doctor, an eye surgeon, I believe, who allegedly killed his wife, although he claims he found her hanging after a suicide. And it developed from there. It turned out he was into drugs in a big way, methamphetamine, I believe. He was a regular user of sex workers. He had some type of relationship with one. And on it went. There was all sorts of sordid details. I'm not that interested in the case, actually. I'm more interested that this is written by Steve Bronius, an author which I enjoy the work of, and he spent about the last 20 years looking at the seedier sides, crime, deprivation, failing towns or whatever of New Zealand, and he kind of hovers between a serious anthropological look at people and society and humour. Also have another book by him called The Man Who Ate Lincoln Road, which is a compilation of his newspaper columns where he basically selected a large street full of food establishments in Auckland, and basically one by one went the entire length of the street trying their dishes, and that was very humorous and funny. And then he kind of switches 180 degrees into stories like Civilization, I think it was one of his books, and Missing People, all that type of thing, where he takes a serious but compassionate look at the seedier side of society and the individuals involved. So He recently said that he was not going to do crime stories anymore because he was a reporter for one of the Auckland newspapers and crime was his beat, and he was giving that all up. And then this case came along, Polkinghorne, and he was enlisted to cover the trial day by day. So he's created a book out of his coverage. Hopefully he'll keep to his word this time, but it'll be sad not to get more books by Steve Bronius. So that is Polkinghorne. Okay, I think we are done for this video. It is, like I said, it is 9:36 AM on the 31st of December 2025. It's been quite a year. I think I've been saying that the last couple of years, but it really has been one for me. I hope everybody is enjoying their break, if they've got one, between Christmas and New Year. I'll be back soon. I have a review itching to be recorded about the book The Martians, which I mentioned earlier in this video. So we'll be back with a review soon. I may tack a little bit on the end of this video because I've got another book due, or the app on my phone tells me it's due to be delivered today, so I might add that on later to the end of this video. So this may not be the very end. We'll see. Okay, thank you for watching. Cheers. Hi, me again, back again. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I was waiting on a book to arrive, and about 1 o'clock today, 20 minutes ago, as you can see from the clock on the computer, this arrived from Book Hero, it still seems new to me, New Zealand online bookstore. I think they've been going a year or so now. So there's their logo on there and my address blotted out. I hope that QR code doesn't work for anyone on screen. Anyway, so why not? This is going to be the last book I obtained this year. I'm not sure the grand total of all the books this year, but quite a lot. And anyway, so let's open this together. So trusty knife. Let's see. And a little bit there. Okay. There we go. Box is open. And in here somewhere is a book. And that book is Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. Now I've seen this one getting really high amounts of praise on everyone's end of the year best of 2025 list. It came out back in March, I believe, in its first market that it came out, and then in August in the rest of the world, and for some reason I only just started hearing about it. So basically it's a survey of the impacts and the fight against the deadly disease tuberculosis, how it's always been with us and we can't seem to get rid of it. Also has a bit of a humanised thread in it where it's a gentleman called, I believe, Henry Rader, a gentleman in Sierra Leone, a tuberculosis patient, and he follows his progress with the disease. Like I said, it gets rave reviews. It's not too thick, it's about 200 and something pages. And yeah, so that is the last book for this year. I'll be reading this one very shortly, I believe. Anyway, so that is Everything is Tuberculosis from John Green. And thank you to the people at Book Hero for getting that to me very, very quickly and in time for the end of this video. So, if you're watching this on the 1st of January or later, Happy New Year. I hope the new year brings everything you want. And we'll be back soon with another review, like I said, probably The Martians by, sorry, the name has eluded me, David Barron, I believe. Okay, right, so that's me signing off for 2025. Cheers.